Hello, Oakville film fans. Thank you so much for joining us at home and screening virtually this special presentation for the 10th annual Oakville Film Festival with OFFA. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's feature presentation of Cover Your Ears, and we're so excited that you're sticking around for this very special video package and bonus feature just for you. My name is Tyler Collins. I'm one of the hosts of the Oakville Film Festival and arts reporter for Oakville News. You can read us online for free every day at oakvillenews.org. As we're beginning to wind down the festival, we hope you've enjoyed so many of the great movies we've been showing over the course of the week. But before we finish tonight's package, we have an exclusive interview with two of the lead creatives from the wonderful documentary that you just watched. Joining us today via Zoom in this special pre-taped Q&A are two of the lead creatives from Cover Your Ears. They're joining us from Vancouver, British Columbia. First, we have the director, producer, writer, and editor of the film, Sean Patrick Shaw.
Hello.
And also with us is the producer, composer, and assistant editor of the film, Kayvon Suremi.
Hey, everyone.
Now, unlike some of our other virtual events, unfortunately, we're pre-taping this, so any of your live questions here in the chat won't be sent to us, but we do hope you enjoy this exclusive interview just for you for watching this at home virtually as part of the Oakville Film Festival. Now, gentlemen, first, I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this with our live, not quite live audience, I should say. Let's start at the conception of the project. Can either of you tell us, where did the idea and the concept for Cover Your Ears come from?
We initially were kind of looking at a documentary centered on the dirty blues, which we just briefly touch on in this documentary with Lucille Bogan. And we just found it so fascinating and started kind of expanding that idea and realized there was so much more meat on the bone and so many more examples of dirty music. And then that just kind of snowballed into a documentary about the history of censorship.
So what was it about dirty music that essentially got the two of you excited from the beginning and wanted you to explore the issue further?
I think we just stumbled across Lucille Bogan and we were just fascinated that that music came out in like the 20s. And so we just started digging further and further and finding other artists that kind of were of the same ilk. And I just found it fascinating. I'm a big music fan and I had no idea that that genre existed. So it was kind of fun to dive into.
Now, you mentioned starting in the 1920s and how music censorship has been at the forefront, not just recently, but over the last century. How did you find the most essential moments over a 100-year time span to tell the story?
That was kind of tough. It was covering the whole 100 years. We didn't want to just do like every instance of censorship in a linear form.
You would have a 20-hour miniseries at that stage in the game.
Exactly. Yeah. So we kind of broke it down into what we felt were big cultural moments and big shifts in the culture based around the music, and used specific examples to kind of illustrate that.
Yeah, and there was a point actually where the film was running around 3 hours and we had to cut it down massively to be able to fit it into, a watchable time.
And it seemed impossible. I remember watching that like 3.5-hour version and being like, we cannot trim a minute out of this. And you find a way to do it.
Now, normally when you're finding ways to find the essence of the movie and find the best material, that's a symbiotic relationship between a director and an editor finding the most important bits. You're one of the directors, of course, who was editing his own work, and you assisting. So how was that collaborative relationship different? You were in charge of your own editing.
Yeah, you got to be pretty hard on yourself. Like some days you absolutely fall in love with the shot and refuse to take it out. And then other days you got to put your director producer hat on and say, it's got to go for time reasons. It is a definite struggle, a bit of a back and forth. And that's where Kayvon would come into and come in with fresh eyes and be like, that can go, that can be shorter. So we kind of worked it out together.
So which one of you was the more ruthless editor between the two of you? Who was usually the one championing more, and who was the one trying to argue for the cuts?
I can get pretty ruthless with the edits, but you have to. I mean, when you're looking at it and you say half of this has to end up on the editing floor, you start being like, well, this guy blinks too long. There's a sigh before his sentence or whatever. So anything that, kind of sticks out, you just lose.
Now let's talk a bit about your relationship with music, Doc. Actually, before we go on to this, I'm curious: is there one scene that was the last go where you really were humming and hawing? Do we keep this in, or do we take it out? What's the one thing that didn't make it you maybe wish was still in the final feature?
It's a great question. We had a section on album artwork that we completely don't touch on. And we dug in pretty deep and spent like a good couple weeks researching it and finding, different examples. And then that was one of those things where we just had to cut the whole section out to lose the time. And we kind of justified it by going, well, it's not actual music. So we're not talking about like music in this instance. But yeah, there was great examples that we had to leave on the editing room floor.
All right, recording, Wendy. Wendy, can we do a hard cut on the recording, please? Now, I'd like to move on to talking about music documentaries as a genre of film in total. This is quite a popular subset of documentary filmmaking, and people love to talk about music, especially last fall with HBO's Unplugged series, where they did like 10 different movies all about different artists and different producers. So, when you went to start creating your idea, talking about the music industry, what are some of the things you wanted to do or focuses you had so your movie would stand out?
I think covering the length of time that we covered and the subject matter. I mean, this is the first, to our knowledge, the first feature-length documentary that looks at music censorship, which we found kind of shocking. But yeah, I think that kind of sets us apart from other music docs. There's a lot of like biography style music docs on one band or one, artist, which I've done myself. But yeah, this felt like a kind of all-encompassing, broad strokes type of film.
Now, you're both experienced documentary filmmakers yourselves. Sean, this is your seventh documentary project, and Kayvon, this is your third. What is it about music documentary that's different from documentary more broadly? What do you have as filmmakers have to do differently to refine the film into the final product?
Well, I guess like because we're dealing with the history of it all, it's a little different than cutting together, somebody's life and telling a story like a biography. So I guess, we were focusing more on events that happened over time by many different artists versus just like things that might happen within one artist's life sort of thing.
And then I think that gives you a little bit more leeway to craft a story. When you're telling the story of someone's life, you kind of have to stay within those boundaries of telling that story. But when you're just saying censorship in music, like we could have went anywhere with it. We could have pasted any way we wanted to, focused on any subsection as long as we wanted to. So it kind of gave us freedom in that way that we could craft a story more.
Let's talk about the actual subject now of the reaction to censoring music and its positive and negative effects. Do you think your film is going to have a serious social change or could have the impact of changing people's minds?
I think I wouldn't. I think it would be maybe a bit hubris to think that our film's going to change anyone's mind, but I do think it's really relevant that near the end of the film we go into rap lyrics being brought into court as evidence, which is kind of a new thing, and I think it raises a lot of awareness towards that. We didn't know a whole lot about that until we dove into the subject and started doing research, and I think that's kind of the new final frontier for music censorship now that the internet has basically lifted label censorship. Now it's cancel culture and kind of courtroom battles.
What do you two hope audiences will take away now that they finish seeing your wonderful movie? What do you hope the audience leaves with, and what's the impression you want them to have as the end credits are rolling?
I mean, it's kind of grim, but just that nothing's changed in 100 years. That we're still looking at censorship. A lot of it is race-based, a lot of it is religion-based. And so many other things in the music industry have changed, and that seems to be a through line that just continues.
Is there any of the examples or stories that you go through in the movie that particularly anger you or make or inspire you wanting to do something more about it?
Tiny Do.
Yeah, the story of the rapper Tiny Do, who's our first example in the film of, I mean, he was jailed for 7 months based on the content of his music and being tied to a gang. And he ended up getting out of jail, suing the state for $1.5 million, which is a kind of good story in the end. But, you know, what if that didn't happen? You know, there are other rappers, there's rappers currently on trial right now with their lyrics being entered as evidence. And that penal code is still being used today. So yeah, it's still scary out there.
Yeah, Tiny was actually like facing life in prison over it.
Yeah, he was charged with 9 shootings that he was not involved with, based on his music.
Now, let's pivot to talk about you both and your working relationship as filmmakers together. Because you've worked on multiple features together now. What is it about each other that draws you guys to want to keep working together again and again?
I think the willingness to just do it. We're definitely not doing it for the big bag of money at the end of this independent documentary. And I think it's a ton of work. So finding each other able to stick it out for years at a time with you know, not much promise of making a bunch of money off it, I think that's important.
Yeah, we have a really good working relationship, and we're able to like hold each other accountable to get things done in a timely manner, and it just works really well.
Yeah, and the longer we do it, the more we find our groove, right? Like the first one went well, the third one's gone like swimmingly.
So on that same groove, like I like groove, by the way, very appropriate. I like that. Talking about that, what is your favorite thing about each other, and or what is the special element that the other person brings to the table?
Oh God.
Can I start?
Sure, yeah, please.
Amazing. His work ethic is impeccable.
Yeah, I mean, I could say the same. We both, I mean, I can call him at 7 in the morning on the weekend. I can call him at midnight on a weekday, and messages always get answered. No one disappears for any long period of time. And it's really a battle. It's like a total war situation where it's 2 years of literally every day you're doing something. So to not want to like strangle each other at the end is very, very important.
That's commendable.
Yeah.
You mentioned it was 2 years from the first pitch meeting to the actual final print. How long was this project from start to finish?
Well, it's never done because we're in our festival run, so we'll still be dealing with this film for the next year or more. But from concept to final cut, 2 years.
Yeah, it would have been just before COVID hit. We came up with the concept and then worked through COVID,
Yeah,
shooting everything.
yeah, we came up with this great idea for a documentary, and then a pandemic hit. We were like, is this still possible to do? So we shot the whole thing throughout COVID.
Now, what are some of the added, this might sound like an obvious question. What were some of the added challenges of creating the film in COVID-19?
I'll take this one. Usually I would travel to whatever city, spend 5 days there trying to collect as many interviews as possible. But travel was not possible with this film. So I think we in the end hired 35 satellite crew members in countries all over the world. We would have to live Zoom the interview so it feels like I'm in the room. And you're blindly trusting people you've never worked with before. Massive challenges. But on the flip side of that, during the pandemic, everyone had a lot more time. No bands were on tour, so we were able to get access to people we might not have got access to. And the feeling of just talking to a laptop was kind of more normal for people, where I've had to do those interviews sparingly in documentaries before, and they always feel kind of clunky, but I think the pandemic kind of taught everyone how to do Zooms proper, and it worked out well in the end.
Now, before we wrap up for today, I want to switch topics one more time. One of the greatest parts of the Oakville Film Festival is there's a huge number of our audience that are aspiring filmmakers or new to the industry filmmakers. So if you were to be able to look at some of those new talents or new filmmakers in the audience watching this right now, what is some of the advice, both as filmmakers and documentarians, you would give to them as they start their careers?
Just do it.
Yeah,
Just get into it and do it.
That's the big one, is don't wait for somebody to give you money to do it. Don't wait for the right grant. Don't wait for, just do it. It's better to do it and have it under your belt and then learn and do the next one than to wait around forever for your first film to be your opus.
Yeah. Nothing will ever line up perfectly for you. You just have to go out there and give it your all, no matter what.
Yeah, and that kind of teaches you to be a good producer too, because you're pivoting in the moment all the time. So yeah, definitely, that's always my advice to filmmakers: is just do it. Don't wait for somebody to tell you you can do it. Don't wait for any gatekeeper to ask for your film. Just do it. And as a documentarian, I would say do stories that you find yourself interesting. Don't try to chase like a bad story or try to tick a box of some sort. If you find the story interesting, you can bet that other people will find it interesting as well.
Well, Sean and Kevon, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this very special Q&A. We really appreciate both you making the time to do this for the Oakville audience and also for sharing your movie with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We're happy to be part of the festival.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Now, we'd like to give a very special thank you to you, our audience, as well, for sticking around for this very special featurette. Don't forget, we have 2 other features that are streaming virtually, and tickets are still on sale for all the virtual packages, both the features and the short films that we are offering as part of this year's Oakville Film Festival. Some of our in-person events, if they haven't already happened, depending when you are streaming this, we also still have tickets for sale online at OFFA.ca. And last but certainly not least, this feature, Cover Your Ears, is eligible for the Audience Choice Award, which is the most important award we give out at this festival every year, because the winner is decided on by your votes and along the voting tab that is on the bottom of your screen right now, where you can rate how much you enjoyed the film. This Audience Choice Award this year is sponsored by Expedia Cruises and Celestial Cruises. You can vote for every movie you've seen over the course of the festival, and every vote gives you one entry into a grand prize contest for a free cruise for two from Athens, Greece through the Mediterranean. One lucky Audience Choice voter will win this cruise prize, and it could be you. So if you enjoyed the movie, vote for it right here, right now. It's that easy. And then go to Greece, I guess. That sounds fantastic. But for everybody here, including our technical crew, Tori Nixon, and our executive director, Wendy Donnan, thank you so much for joining us for this special presentation of the Oakville Film Festival 2023. We hope you enjoy the rest of this year's offerings and have a good night.